Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We want to thank you for joining us and welcome you to our 6th episode of Knowledge and Know-How with NetApp Support, our support webinar series. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Dwight Cranford. I'm a leader in the NetApp Support Center. Today we have a couple of presenters. Steve Price, he is a senior escalation engineer in the NetApp Support Center. He's been supporting SolidFire and NetApp HCI for 10 years. David Basarlou is a senior technical support engineer who's also one of our NetApp HCI specialists. Just real quick, I want to go over why we're doing this webinar series. If you've been to one of our previous episodes, this is going to be a review, but if this is your first, just want to explain a little bit as to why NetApp Support is doing these webinars. Generally in support, we only work with our customers when we're dealing with a problem or trying to resolve an issue. But for us, it's also important to connect with you outside of working those cases. We want to share some support center knowledge, like tools that we use, and give you ways you can easily manage your environment. Some of our top priorities in the customer are the customer experience and building an effective partnership. So, we want you to know when you contact NetApp Support, you feel like you're contacting an extension of your own team. To help with this, one of the proactive steps we're taking is webinars such as this one. We want to be able to connect and share important information. Hopefully it will not only lead to issues being resolved quicker, but also prevent problems before they even occur. We're going to show you things such as tools that we utilize in support that are also available to you, our customers. And hopefully by sharing this knowledge, you'll be able to manage your own environment more effectively. And when you do need NetApp support, you'll be even more prepared to open that support case. And you'll know that NetApp support is there to help you and resolve your issues quickly. Just a couple of housekeeping things. There is an active Q&A. We will answer all questions that are posted. So on your screen, you should see a Q&A box. If you have questions, go ahead and post them there. What we're going to do is read those aloud. We do have sections to break for questions in our presentation. So we'll read those aloud and get answers to you on this call. Also know that this is being recorded, so we will send the presentation out with the recording, and it'll also be added to our Knowledge and Know-How webinar playlist on YouTube. There's also a link in the presentation, so you'll be able to review not only this episode, but the previous 5 if you're interested. So with that, here's the agenda for today. We're going to focus on hybrid cloud control. We've already done the intro there, so we're going to look at what is hybrid cloud control. You're also going to hear that referred to us by us as HCC. Connecting hybrid cloud control to your HCI environment using Swagger. And then we're going to conclude with a live demo of HCC. And then we'll just go over a brief call to action as to what happens after the webinar. So we're going to go ahead and get started with all the good stuff here. And Steve Price is going to kick us off with a hybrid cloud control support overview. Steve?
Great. Thank you, Dwight. I appreciate it. And welcome to our hybrid cloud control presentation. Let's jump right into it. So what can HCC do for me? Built into our hybrid cloud control, we have one-touch element upgrade, OS upgrade, storage firmware upgrades, compute firmware upgrades, our log collection, the ability to manage multiple clusters in one Mnode, multiple vCenter capabilities, expand storage and compute, and access to ActiveIQ quickly out of the HCC UI. So the first thing we'll look at is the hybrid cloud control pane when you first come in and look at it. We have a single pane of glass for managing the HCC compute and storage resources that are all in a single view, which makes it kind of nice to be able to just go look at things. The resource manager for compute and storage, deploy and expansion of the H-series node. We can look at the capacity, performance, and usage monitoring on the cluster or vCenter instance that we're looking at. And we have management and maintenance tasks built into the HCC UI, one-touch upgrades for compute and storage firmware, and the Element OS, as well as easy log bundle collection. So simplified upgrades delivered via HCC. We expose the common upgrade workflow for all components in the hybrid cloud control, pre-checks and management services, storage, and compute. So we can go check the environments before we start any of the upgrades. We also do an automated package download for the upgrade packages for storage and compute, and we can also do an offline package upload for dark sites. We have intelligent metrics built in to track the progress of those upgrades, and we've decoupled the firmware upgrades for flexibility to upgrade the storage nodes firmware independently or part as the element upgrade. We also really focused on the speed and robustness of the upgrades, so it takes a lot less time and it's a lot more effective than it has been in the past. Upgraded the HCC and the management services. So we have version requirements to run the HCC, HCI 1.6 or greater, and the management node must be at least 11.3 or greater. To do anything, any of the upgrades or anything, you have to have your management services up to date. And when you go into the management services, you'll see the current version, if there's an available version, and the release notes on that version, and the either upgrade or download the package to upgrade to that. Once everything's up to date and installed, the hybrid cloud control URL is the management node IP/HCC, and it'll take you to the landing page for it. And the upgrade tab up there is to get to the upgrades for the storage and compute firmware as well. One-touch upgrades, the lifecycle management for the NetApp HCI and SolidFire. Hybrid cloud control delivers a simple, intuitive user experience for upgrading the element software, storage firmware on the nodes, compute node firmware, compute node drives, and compute node BIOS, and management services. And we can upgrade all that in this single pane. All the packages are automated. Health checks are available on the site here. We recommend running a health check before we do any upgrade to anything, because if the health check fails, the upgrade's going to fail, and we want to make sure everything's ready to go with all the pre-checks before we start the upgrade. And we can automate it with the API, upgrade APIs. Automated storage firmware upgrades. So next to the management, you can go to storage. You have either the element that you're going to upgrade to or the firmware you're going to upgrade to with the release notes. So the firmware bundles are available in 12.0 or higher for the H-series nodes. Note that the older SolidFire, like 19.210, 9010, those nodes don't support the BIOS and BMC upgrades for the firmware on these in the HCC. Automatic compute firmware upgrade. We can upgrade the compute firmware. When you go to the compute side, you can see when your BMC is connected and everything's good there, you can see what we have on it, what the proposed is, and upgrade to those versions on the compute side. By doing that, you go into the vCenter, you put your node into maintenance mode, and move through the upgrades that way. So you don't have any resources on that when you're doing the upgrade on the firmware. And we'll talk about that in the live demo as well. Log collection made easy. This is an exciting feature we have in the HCC to do a range of logs instead of having to go out and grab the entire bundle off the entire cluster for the life of the system. We can do a date range now, last 12 hours, last day, last 3 days, depending on when you had the issue on the node. And we can take it down to specific nodes, specific logs, get the management logs, the storage logs by node, or the compute logs and the storage crash dumps, which is very beneficial to be able to narrow it down so we're not grabbing this monster log bundle and uploading it to us. Ability to manage multiple clusters in one node. As you can see here, we have 2 clusters connecting to the HCI or the HCC, and they're easy to connect up in the HCC, and we can manage multiple clusters. To add additional clusters into the M node in the HCC, it's as easy as adding a cluster in the HCC interface. You just add a new cluster, put the MVIP in, username, password, and it adds it in and starts reporting into ActiveIQ as well, because telemetry is active on the cluster. Managing the through HCC, the cluster, you can create LDAP users, you create users on the cluster, you can manage the QoS policies, create volumes, access groups, all of that through HCC. Multiple vCenter compatibility. You can see we have in the vCenter instance, we have 2 separate instances in here connected up on the compute side, and you can report all that through the HCC. Expanding storage and quick access link to ActiveIQ. So when you go into the top right corner, you have expand. That will run the NDE for the HCI environment, and you can quickly expand compute or storage with that link. And on the 3 bar there, you can also click the View ActiveIQ, which will link you out to your ActiveIQ site to manage your cluster on ActiveIQ. Connecting the HCC to your HCI environment via the Swagger UI. The web address to that is mnode/mnode. You got your post assets, your different assets in there. One of the first things to think about, or when you do your initial Mnode installation, you have your base assets, and that's your first cluster that you connected when you installed your Mnode, and those are your base assets or your cluster that's connected into that, which connects it to ActiveIQ, and that's your base asset. Swagger UI, just a look at what the Swagger UI looks like. We'll talk about this in the live demo. The get and the post and the delete and all those things, and authorizing to use the Swagger UI. These are some of the base methods for each asset. You had your post, delete, get, and put, and David will walk through those in the live demo on where to use these and how to add your compute nodes into your HCC environment. Key takeaways. All upgrades will move to the HCC going forward. Element OS and firmware upgrades are separate now. We don't have to have them all built into the same package. Compute node firmware can be updated through the HCC. Package downloads are automated, and for dark sites, we can manually download them and upload them into the HCC, upload them to the nodes and upgrade them. Log collection is much more granular in the HCC than we have had in the past. Ability to connect multiple clusters in the HCC, easily expand storage and compute nodes in the cluster, a quick link to the ActiveIQ from the UI, and the Swagger UI to configure compute nodes into the HCC. All right, cool. Questions on the content that's been delivered thus far?
Hey, Steve, we do have a couple of questions. First one is, how is the HCC initially installed?
Great question. So the HCC is initially installed as your base asset, or when you install the Mnode as your base asset, at Mnode 11.3 or greater. So when you do the Mnode setup, it initially sets up the HCC, and you can browse to it from there.
Okay. Next, is HCC part of management services?
So HCC and management services are together. So management services runs out of HCC, And yes.
Okay. Is the HCC a software as a service offering? I think I can take that one. So it's not part of an offering as a service as of right now. However, it's part of our solutions tool set for HCI. So hopefully that answers your question there. And if you need to follow up on this,
please. Mnode.
Correct. Yep. The next question is, Compute Node firmware update launches virtual media, which is built on SMBv1 for remote mount of ISO. Will SMB1 be updated soon?
I don't have the answer for that right now, but I can definitely get that.
Okay. So Paul, if you want to drop your email to us, I'm going to give you an email address at the end of the presentation. You can either drop it in this Q&A or shoot us a quick email after, and we'll give you a follow-up on that question. All right. And the last one, I used to need to open a support case for an upgrade. Are you saying that now I can complete the upgrades myself?
That's correct. So this is our customer installable upgrade process, and the only thing we ask is that you go out to your ActiveIQ and suppress your alerts, which you can do now. You don't have to call into support to suppress those now. You can go right to ActiveIQ and suppress those alerts on the cluster that you're upgrading and upgrade away.
All right. And we did have one more. Will you be able to expand and contract the cluster with HCC and have all VMware along with HCI functions?
Yes, that's correct. With the NDE with the expand, you just click on the expand. You can expand your cluster and or your compute nodes right out of the HCC.
All right. I think we have all of these answered. If you have questions, pop them in the Q&A. For now, we're going to go ahead and roll into the live demo. So, David, you want to take us through that?
Absolutely. So I'd like to say thank you, Dwight and Steve, and good morning, good afternoon, and evening to everybody that's joining us today. Today I will be doing a presentation on HCC itself and its features, and we'll cover Swagger at the end and how it comes into play with HCC. Okay, so I have 3 slides we will discuss real quick. So logging into HCC for the very first time. As you will see, well, I'll be doing the demonstration on it. It's pretty much what Steve just covered in the slides, but now it's going to be real life on a lab, so you can see how things actually look and how they should look once it's configured correctly. Okay, and what I mean once configured correctly, it's configured correctly via Swagger, okay, which will be touched at the end. So to log in HCC for the very first time, use the Mnode IP address /HCC, which will take you to the home page, as you see there. Now on here, what you have to do is at the very beginning, so you could just tell this is the very first time you logged in here, you have to click on Upgrade in the upper right-hand corner, which will take you to the Upgrade section. In here, as Steve mentioned as well, is it will show you your current version and your available version. You always have to upgrade it to the latest version in order to continue with the functionality of upgrading storage firmware and compute firmware. So this is your very first step before you do anything. Now, if you have a dark site and you could just download the files, you could use the browse button there. This goes the same for our storage upgrades and compute node upgrades. Everything is configured for dark sites as well. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So once we do the begin upgrade, it upgrades the management services to 2.17. And once that's complete, you log into your dashboard. And now this is where I'll take it over in our real lab. So I'm going to share my screen. And Awesome. So now everybody should be seeing my lab. If for some odd reason you're not, please someone let me know. Okay. So let's talk about this. So you saw all the presentation and slides, but let's look how it looks overall in one. We will start off with the dashboard on here. So as you can see, and keep in mind, this is based on 2.17 management services. The reason I say that is because as we move forward in management services, we include bug fixes and new features. Okay, so you always want to be at the most current version of management services. As we start off, we will see your total storage cluster and then compute nodes. If you don't have an HCI environment, you don't see the compute node section, only the storage. However, though, since this is HCI, we have both, right? So you can see on here storage, compute nodes. If you click on the details, it shows your cluster name, total nodes, 18 volumes, and it's connected, meaning it can actually speak from your M node to your cluster. Same with the compute node, same thing. Your cluster, it's one cluster consists of 4 nodes. As you see on this page, you see the storage capacity, compute utilization, and storage performance. So overall, you see what I want everybody to see in here, everything is one pane, which is nice. We make administration easy, upgrade easy, and capturing logs easy. Okay, and I'll show you as I continue through this. Let's move to the next section of nodes. Okay, I'm just starting to the left, move out to the right. On nodes, you see, once again, your storage nodes, what type of models they are, the current element version, and the firmware bundle. Okay. Compute, same thing. You see your compute nodes, the type of models, specs on them, and your vCenter instances that they're tied to. As Steve pointed out earlier, you could have a couple of vCenters in here tied, and they'll obviously reflect correctly in here, and also the BMC connection status. Going to the storage. So this is newer as we proceed. If people have seen the older versions, you will come in here, you go volumes, and you see overview. Now we have more access and control to what we can do from HCC. You also have access groups. You have accounts. You have initiators, QoS policies. When you look at this, it's pretty much similar to the cluster UI. If I go to my cluster UI, same, similar stuff. Now in hybrid control, you see in here all your volumes, and you could just edit with the 3 dots. You can edit the volumes and adjust your QoS, so you're able to manage them now before you were not able to. So this is an awesome feature, and it's just going to get better as we go. If we go, so that's from this left side total right now. Let's move to the right side, which is another great features that we keep adding and just get better at. On here, we also have, actually I just realized, let me go back one. When it comes to adding a storage cluster, okay, how simple we made things, all by just clicking configure the storage cluster and add a storage cluster, just like that. It's now in, so now you can manage multiple clusters. Telemetry was set up at the very first time when you set up your M node. So all you do is once you add this cluster, you can see you put in your MVIP storage credentials, and your cluster's in, and already will be reporting ActiveIQ just like that, which is pretty neat. Going up in the upper right hand, we also got user management now as well. You can, as Steve pointed out, you can create users, configure LDAP, multiple clusters, multiple users, right? You can do all this in this one pane. Another great feature that I like seeing on here is collect logs. When you do the collect logs, and I'm sure the people that have dealt and have captured some logs in the past when you've ran into issues, you've seen some of the logs can be very lengthy. Now what we could do is we could do a date range, right? So you could pick on here last day, last 3 days, say issue happened yesterday, go capture the last 3 days just to capture anything before. We'll pick that. And for logs, we are capturing your management node itself. If you remember in the past, kind of this was a pain point that I would see is customers have to go to individual nodes and the cluster master, download each one, and then upload. So we have all these uploads, all these different logs. It takes quite a bit to go between each one to download, and it's just kind of a mess in a way, right? Now we make this simple. Just click on whichever one you want to capture from, go to your storage logs. Say I had an issue with node 4, and my cluster master is 3 because we would like to have both. Usually we could tell the whole picture of what's going on between both of those two. So I would just select my cluster master 3, my node that I have issues with 4. I'll keep the management logs, and see I had some crash dumps. I could pick this as well. And then one of my compute nodes had an issue, just say maybe a purple screen that came back up or whatever reason it was. Same applies here. Just we'll say compute node 2. So now when I click on here, collect logs, the beauty of this, it captures the last 3-day events with all these logs, puts it all in one bundle so you don't have to go multiple sites or multiple tabs, like I said, from the nodes. And then you could upload this straight to our NTP site, our NetApp FTP site, and we could continue troubleshooting from there, gather the logs. This right here is huge to me just because it makes the job so much easier for us and you as the customer when it comes to capturing logs when we request it. You also have up here in the upper right, in the same menu, View Active IQ. There's a lot of times that you want to maybe go check Active IQ, right? As everybody knows, in our cluster UI, and if you don't know, if you're new to this, in the cluster UI, we only report the storage. This is the storage piece of it, but not the compute nodes. In HCC, we do have the compute nodes in there, but also in Active IQ is where you can see your compute nodes, how they report, and their stats on them. Okay, so you have a quick link for that right here. Now, moving back to the main piece of this, there's expand, like how Steve was saying earlier. This uses NDE as soon as you click on this, and you have to enter your vCenter information, and it's going to ask you, what do you want to add? Do you want to add a storage node? Do you want to add a compute node? Provide the networking configuration that you need, continue, and once it's all said and done, it puts it in vCenter for you just like the rest of your nodes. It saves you a lot of time and configuration and takes the complexity out. It's a very nice feature. Okay. On to upgrades. So this is another big piece of this. Moving forward, we're no longer going to be using the SF install commands. What everybody, if you've done upgrades, that's what we've always done in the past, is CLI and use SF install. Now our future is we're moving with HCC. It's more the one push button upgrade. So once we click on the upgrade, we get to the screen, right? If we didn't have management services, obviously we have to upgrade that first. Since we're up to date, we can continue. Please keep in mind for the dark sites, we do have this browse button here, right? This is how you could do it manually. You download it to your computer, upload it, and it does the same task. Let's move to the storage. This is the beauty of this, the storage, and then even more beautiful with the compute firmware. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. I like to point this out. Okay, any changes that you make in HCC, it could take up to 15 minutes to reflect. Also, any changes that you make in Swagger UI, which is used to configure HCC, it could take up to 15 minutes before it reflects in HCC. Okay, keep that in mind because sometimes it's not right away, and just be patient and eventually log out, log back in. It should come in here correctly. Now, with the storage, you get to see this pane. So once again, 4 nodes, the version you're at, the firmware bundle you're at, and it says versions available. Okay. Please note before any upgrade, you always will do a health check. I would always say because you should always do a health check. If this is missed, or let's say it like this, if you do a health check and this fails, your upgrade will fail anyway. So the key is make sure this passes first and then continue with the upgrade. Now, based on the version that I have, it's 12.0. The next available version is 12.2. If you have older versions, and what you'll see in here is you'll see multiple versions that you can actually upgrade to. So you don't have to upgrade always to the latest one. Depends on where you're at. You could actually step it, or you could go on a tested version that the rest of your environment is in. So that way everything just matches across the board in your environment. Okay? But all you're going to do on here, say I would upgrade. I'm not going to do this because this takes 45 minutes to an hour depending per each node. but I'm going to click on this upgrade and click, the radio button and click Begin Upgrade. Please note that this will just roll one node at a time throughout. Your cluster, you have the ability now to suppress your cluster for alerts, so you should get no cases created. And as it goes one node at a time, it upgrades your nodes. Once it's complete, you log back in the interface, and now you will see the firmware only. Okay, the firmware only is its own bundle. So BMC, BIOS, whatever we release that is not included in the prior main version of Element OS, because this version we know, and other 11.8, we do have BMCs and BIOS versions included. But when we do the one-offs, we don't, instead of just waiting for a next version and we need to get out to the customer, it'll be in the firmware only section. So always make sure when you're done with your upgrade of Element, come back in here and just see if you have a firmware only. If you do, click on it, begin upgrade. This does the same process as it did in upgrade, one node at a time until it's complete. Come back up. The storage now is upgraded in Element OS and the latest BMC BIOS firmware that's needed. In Compute Firmware, this to me brings much joy, since this has been, seems like a work in progress until we got to this point, and now it's finally here. In prior versions, you were not able to do this. And what I mean by this is upgrade the compute node via HCC. I forget exactly what version we started, 2.13 or 2.14, that we could do the compute nodes. The key, like I said, is always update to the latest management services. You will be able to have these capabilities and features. Okay. As you will see on here, now you see your compute nodes. In the past versions, what we'd be doing is we would use the ISO. We would do a manual a manual upgrade of the BMC and the BIOS. So you load it to the BMC, boot your node up, and do that one at a time as you trickle down too. Now you get to see your current versions, you get to see your proposed versions, and you can click Begin Upgrade. As Steve pointed out, you put your node in maintenance mode, make sure it's clean, and then you can click Begin Upgrade, and it'll upgrade the node itself. Okay. Once you are done, come back in here just to double check there's nothing new. All this should say everything's up to date. And I think I mentioned to say is like this: always do a health check, right? If the health check fails, most likely there's probably some other serious issue with this. So definitely address the health check. And that is the compute nodes. So this is one of the biggest things right here, just because it makes your life easier now upgrading and managing these compute nodes in regards to the upgrades of the firmware and BMCs, right? Now, in order for this, and when I say this ACC to look like this and be configured like this, you have to use Swagger UI to configure this, okay? And usually it comes in the base assets. It's your storage and your Mnode, and telemetry equals true. So you don't have a controller, which your controller is your vCenter, and you don't have compute nodes added in, especially if it's your first time you're going in here. If you've had it before, things should move over. If you don't, you'll have to add those in. Now, all the configuration in ACC is done via Swagger UI, which is this interface right here. So I'm going to log in just to show you a quick demonstration how this looks. Just click on Authorize. And in our documentation, we say Mnode-client. I'll use HCI-UI. This will also get added and updated in there. This allows you to have 1 hour of access of being in this interface without timing out. The prior one was a lot less. I believe it was 2 minutes. So when you use this, you log in. You also notice that your locks, I forgot to mention that locks was open before. Now it's locked. So that means you can actually do certain tasks in here. What I'm going to point more specifically is to compute nodes, since that's usually what gets added in or gets removed if there's a node failure. Okay, so let's go to the compute node section. This one actually has 2 gets, but as you can see on here, I'm going to try to highlight it since it was on the print screen as well. So it's about this section I'm going to be talking about. So right here we have post if we want to add a new computer asset. So we're going to once we add it in, we want to make sure he's in HCC configured. You come in here and you're gonna I'm gonna click on that. We're gonna add in your computer, so we're gonna click post. Okay. You're gonna enter the parent asset ID, which I'll show you how to get it. You try it out. Let me try it out. You enter the ID, and then here's the fields that you have to just fill in the blank, if you will. I mean, in the string between the quotes, the hardware tag, the host name, the password, right? IP address. The only one you leave alone is the type DSSI host, and then your username. Once you enter this correctly, it's either going to pass or fail. And if you look in the response code section, the 200s are always good. 200 is done. 201 is created. 204 is delete, as you will see throughout when you're doing this exercise for yourself when that time comes. But that's how we walk through here on Swagger. We walk basically, so this is post, just how that looks. If I wanted to delete a specific compute node, say my node crashed and had a PSOD, a purple screen of death, and we determined, hey, indeed it's hardware, well, let's get that asset out. So we enter, once again, the parent asset ID and the compute ID. What I want everybody to see in here, there's always one similar that's tied between every single asset, and that is your parent ID. Your parent ID is your Mnode ID, okay? Each asset has its own ID itself. Question is, what's an asset? An asset is anything that you're adding to your cluster. So compute nodes is an asset. You're adding additional controller is an asset. You add the BMC itself. When you add the compute node, it will add in the BMC asset. So let's see how this looks. So based on this configuration of HCC that we see now, we saw 4 storage nodes, and then we see 4 compute nodes. Let's see how it looks like in Swagger. So in Swagger, when I come back up here, I do a get all assets. This way it tells me right away, how do I have, things configured in here, so that way it should look correctly in HCC. As I come in here, I do try it out, execute. And as we see in here, it gave me a response of 200, which is good. And this, I'm going to say, so if you've been here for the very first time, this is kind of a little bit overwhelming, by all means. It's, where do you start? What do you do? We do have information that covers in the user guides on this, but when it comes time to doing this, I would recommend come in here, try it for yourself. If it doesn't make sense, please call in, and any one of our HCI technical support engineers should be able to help you and also train you on how to do this correctly. Okay, so what I want basically everybody to look at is just to see the different sections that we have in here. Okay, so here's the compute node section. Okay, in the compute node section, we have our compute nodes, right? So I said there's 2 main things on here. One main thing that's always similar on all, which is your parent ID, and then each asset will have its own unique ID. Okay, so by knowing these 2, you can go in, you can delete an asset, you can modify an asset. Okay, and when you add an asset, all you always need is the parent ID. So let's look what we got. We have 4 compute nodes. We should have 4 compute nodes in here. As you can see, the type is the HCI host. So we got 1. Now scroll down. Should become 2, 3. And I think I had 4 and I just missed it, but I should have all 4 since they reported. We will also have in here, as you see, just going to these sections, the collector, right? This is what gets your cluster talking to our ActiveIQ. The controller. The controller is your vCenter. You have to have this controller in order for have your compute nodes, but it communicates together. As you can see on here, type is vCenter, its own ID, and once again, the parent is always the same from the Mnode. Everything ties to your Mnode. And we have the hardware section. The hardware section is your BMCs. So we should have, since we have 4 compute nodes, we should have 4 BMCs. Once again, with its own unique IDs. The hardware tags, which is the BMC, matches the compute node's hardware tag. And you can see we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Excuse me. Your Mnode. So this is a base asset. When you very first time you configure your Mnode with setup-Mnode, this is what gets input in there as the Mnode name and its ID. And we have the storage, right? So this is our cluster storage name. It doesn't go by storage nodes. I'm sure you can see that, right? Compute nodes are the only ones that's separate. The storage itself, it just encompasses all the storage nodes. So if you have to remove a storage node, you don't have to worry about it. That's all tied in within the storage. However, though, you do have its own unique ID. The parent again, SSL certificate, whether you have one or not. If you don't have one, just make sure when you create this that the string comment itself is deleted and it's just left blank. It should come in as null, like this would show this if you're not using a certificate. Okay, and then telemetry equals true. What's this saying? As soon as you add a cluster, it's going to basically immediately connect it to ActiveIQ, and now your cluster is now reporting in. So this is an overview of Swagger. Like I said, it is complicated when you first see it, but the more you practice it, the more you do this when it comes to adding nodes, removing nodes. Just keep in mind that we have to adjust this as well. Okay. Once we configure this, so if we delete a compute node, say because of PSOD, we have to delete the BMC that's tied, and also the compute node in question. Okay. Then when we add it, we re-add the asset back in because it'll have a different ID. It'll have a different IP address, obviously stay the same, and host name, but it's going to have a different ID, a different hardware tag, so everything has to match. You want to keep this clean in here. You don't want to have extra residue that might cause issues later on in regards to configuration. Okay, and in regards to configuration of HCC. So this is Swagger in a nutshell. Like I said, I'm not going to deal because it does take other things to kind of go, but I just wanted everybody to be aware of this. This is the tool that configures HCC. Okay, and at this point, I am done with my demonstration. Does anybody have any questions?
Hey, David, I did want to read one question. It looks like Steve has answered, but the question is, for storage, HCC rolls the upgrades for element and firmware, but for compute, it only allows one compute node at a time, then starts another. Can this rolling one node at a time also be added to compute nodes so it can do one node at a time, then roll through the compute cluster just like storage? I believe the answer is, for now, it can only do one compute node at a time. I don't know if you want to go into any detail on that or not.
I can say for right now, for this time being right now, that's exactly what it is. It's just one at a time.
Okay. Another question, when do I need to delete an asset?
Good question. So like I was speaking earlier, so you want to delete an asset, and usually when you delete an asset, the asset we're talking about deleting is usually, it's not your storage, it's not your M node, because those are your base assets that you need from the very beginning. It's usually the compute node. Okay, the compute nodes usually what I see is that you're deleting and adding, and you're deleting it because, like I was stating earlier, that say you had a PSOD, the purple screen of death, and it was determined indeed this is a hardware failure. You want to remove, besides in VMware, you remove your host, right? You also come in Swagger in here, and you remove that SSI host itself and the BMC. The reason you want to do that is because everything right now is tied to unique IDs, right? So if you leave that ID in there, or you forget that you delete the compute node, but yet you forget the BMC, when it comes to adding in the new node, the BMC I think will be fine because it'll leave residue still tied, but it's just residue. But if you have the compute node still left in there, and in there obviously it has, as you saw, the same host name, the same IP address, you're going to have conflicting information. So you want to clean from the VMware side, come in Swagger UI, clean your compute node in here and your BMC that's associated with that compute node, and therefore it is clean. Now when you add in the new compute node, you add it back in, and everything aligns with the way you have your configuration from VMware, so it can show correctly in HCC.
And And another question, yeah, what happens if I don't delete an asset after I replace a node?
Oh, okay. So that's all. Just touching up on that. So, like I said, you always want to keep this clean. Okay. BMC, if you left it, it's you're not going to know any difference. But the compute node, if you don't clean up, by all means, when you replace it, you're going to have conflicting information, right? Because you're going to have to use the same IP address that you just replaced. You're going to want to use the same host name that you just used. So when you run through this, you're going to get errors trying to configure that. So that's why it's important you clean up first before you add back in.
All right. And I don't see any other questions. We still have some time, so if you have a question you want to ask, go ahead and put it in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and go into the next slide. So thank you, David, for that live demo. We do have some resources here that you all can access. So you'll receive this at the conclusion of the webinar. I did want to point out there is a lab on demand. I think you can check these out as a customer in 30-minute intervals. So, you want to log in and practice and don't want to use some of your systems or your labs or development systems or whatnot. You can check out some of our lab on demands there. That's a pretty useful link.
Hey, Dwight, on that, I think it's a 30-minute lab that they can check out for an amount of time. It's not a 30-minute interval.
Okay, gotcha.
So the lab takes about 30 minutes to run through.
Okay, thank you. All right, so after this webinar, you're going to receive a survey. These are very important to us. We want to know how we did, what you thought of the content. Also want to know, this is a series, so episode 7 will be coming up. What do you want to hear as our customers? What would you like for us to discuss? Are there things that you're seeing and you want more detail about? So, this is your chance to give us some feedback on what content you want us to put together for you. Also, we do have an email address. It's ng-supportwebinars@netapp.com. So if you want to ask follow-up questions or, would rather put content ideas in an email, please shoot it over to us and we'll make sure we respond. And as I mentioned earlier, we do keep all of these episodes in a playlist on our YouTube channel. So you'll also receive a link to that. If you go out and search YouTube for knowledge and know-how, you should come up with the playlist. But again, we're going to provide the link to you. There is another question that popped in. On the compute node upgrade, when you click on begin upgrade, does it prompt you for which node to put into maintenance mode?
So Darren, yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. And so I do believe, so based on that, I believe, and Darren, great question. I see Darren and Paul asking a lot of good questions and I like it. Let me see. So I know the answer to this as I've done it, but it's been a couple of first. I'm going to select the next screen. I forgot myself, but I thought when you click on the begin upgrade, it's going to start from the top, if I'm not mistaken, and it's just, you're going to just trickle down. I just don't remember that piece offhand. We'll get back to you, Darren, on that, just to let you know exactly that process, how it goes in detail. I just kind of forgot how it goes, but we could definitely get back an answer to you on that, since we have your email.
All right. And I don't see any other questions at this time. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up, give you a few minutes back before your next calls. We do appreciate you joining. It's important for us to connect to our customers outside of support cases and when we're not trying to, in a frenzy, trying to fix something. So be on the lookout for an invitation to episode 7. We haven't put together the content for that yet, but it will be coming out here in a couple of months. So we're trying to do these once a quarter. And again, if you have suggestions for content, please send them over to us. Thanks again, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, everybody.